On Thanksgiving Day, my daughter-in-law threw a plate at me after I refused to let her parents move into my house. "You old egoist," she said, and my son added, "Don't call me your son anymore." I just smiled, got up and called my brother. "Everything is just as you said. Activate the plan." 10 minutes later, I'm Isaiah Riggs. I'm 69 years old, and for the last 10 years, I've been living a quiet life. Maybe too quiet. Before we get to that plate shattering against my wall, let me know in the comments where you're watching this story from. And if you've ever had to deal with family who mistook your kindness for weakness, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. The smell of Thanksgiving has always been my anchor. That mix of sage thyme and slow roasting turkey. It's the smell of my wife, Althea. Even though she's been gone for 10 years, that scent brings her right back into this kitchen. But this year, the smell was soured by something else. Fear. Not my fear. My son's. Andre was pacing the worn linoleum of my kitchen, his dress shoes squeaking. He was wearing a suit that was too tight, trying to impress people who didn't matter in a house he was ashamed of. "Dad, are you absolutely sure you don't want me to just order catering?" he asked for the 4th time, stopping to straighten a picture frame that was already straight. I basted the turkey, the skin a perfect deep golden brown. "I told you, Andre, Thanksgiving is cooked at home. Your mother—" I know. He cut me off, his voice tight with irritation. "Mom always said that, but Dad, Tiffany's parents, they're different. They're used to, I knew they were used to the Buckhead lifestyle. The sprawling mansions, the private clubs, the restaurants where the price of a single steak could feed my neighborhood for a week. What Andre didn't know was that I owned that restaurant, along with the bank that held his car loan and the real estate firm that employed him. I just nodded, playing the part I'd perfected for the last decade, the part of Isaiah Zay Riggs, the quiet, simple-minded widower living on a meager pension in Atlanta's Adair Park. This house, this little 2-bedroom bungalow, Althea and I bought it for $20,000 back when we had nothing but each other. The neighborhood is gentrifying now. Developers, sharks in cheap suits knock on my door every week, offering $500,000 in cash, thinking I'm some old fool they can lowball and flip. They don't know I own the development fund that's buying up the whole block. I keep this house because Althea loved it, because it was the last promise I made to her. "Don't let the money change us, Zay," she'd whispered, her hand in mine. "Especially don't let it change our boy." I failed that last part. The clack, clack, clack of high heels on my original hardwood floors announced Tiffany's arrival. She wasn't dressed for a family dinner. She was dressed for a hostile takeover. She wore a sharp white pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to. "Zay," she said. She never called me Dad. "They're 10 minutes out. Their Uber just crossed I-20. She surveyed my living room. Her nose wrinkled in a way she probably thought was subtle. Her eyes landed on the mantelpiece, the heart of this home. It was crowded with 40 years of memories. Andre's first baseball trophy, my retirement plaque from the community center, a cover story, and right in the middle, the 8x10 wedding photo of me and Althea. We were so young, so full of hope. "Can we please do something about this clutter?" Tiffany asked, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at my wife's picture. Andre flinched. "Tiff, come on. That's Mom." "I know, honey, but it doesn't match the vibe we're trying for. Her parents are very design conscious. It looks messy. Just put it in a drawer until they leave. It's just one dinner. For me—" I stopped basting. I turned and looked at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "The picture stays." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. She hated that word. "Fine, but don't blame me when they think we're living in squalor." She swept out of the room, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume and tension. Andre gave me a helpless look. "She's just stressed, Dad. Be nice." "I am being nice, son," I said, turning back to the oven. "I haven't told her what I really think." The doorbell rang, and I heard Andre rush to answer it, his voice suddenly loud and artificially cheerful. "Richard, Karen, welcome, welcome, come on in." I wiped my hands on my apron and walked into the living room, and there they were, Karen and Richard, Tiffany's parents. Karen was draped in a cashmere shawl that probably cost $2,000. Richard was wearing a Rolex that was so big and bright it looked like a prop. They looked at me then around the room, and their smiles, stretched thin and tight, were identical to their daughters. "Oh, Zay, you must be Andre's father," Karen said, extending a hand but not offering it. She just let her fingers dangle, expecting me to shake them. "This is him, Mom," Tiffany said, rushing over to kiss them. "What a charming bungalow, Andre," Richard said, his eyes scanning the ceiling, looking for cracks. "So much character. It's like stepping back in time." "It's cozy," I said, offering a simple smile. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Do you have any sparkling water, Perrier San Pellegrino?" Karen asked. "I have tap water, or I can make you some sweet tea," I replied. Tiffany winced. "They'll just have water, Zay. Thank you." We sat down at the dinner table. My old oak table, the one I'd built with my own hands with Althea. It was set with her best china, the plates we only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas. The conversation led by Karen and Richard was a performance of casual wealth. The flight was exhausting. Karen sighed, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "First class is just not what it used to be. The legroom was adequate at best," Richard chimed in. "So, Zay, Andre mentioned you're in property management. Is that right?" I carved the turkey. The knife slid through it like butter. "Something like that. I look after a few places here and there. Keeps an old man busy." My internal monologue was less polite. "I look after 47 commercial properties, 3 tech campuses, and the bank that holds your underwater mortgage, Richard." "But who's counting?" Right. "Landlording," Richard said with a chuckle. "Tough gig, I hear. I'm in finance myself, mergers and acquisitions. We just closed a massive deal in North Carolina, $50 million. I nodded, placing a slice of turkey on his plate. "That's fascinating." "You didn't close it, Richard. My fund R&H Capital vetoed that acquisition last Tuesday. You just haven't gotten the memo yet. You're over-leveraged and your company is about to be audited." "Oh, Dickie, don't bore him with shop talk," Karen said, waving her hand, diamonds flashing. "We're just so proud of our Tiffany. And Andre, of course. That new promotion to director, how wonderful." "Yes," I said, looking at my son. "Wonderful." I had signed that promotion paperwork myself. I'd given him a 20% raise, a company car, and a corner office. I did it to see if he would change, if he would be grateful, if he would maybe use that money to, I don't know, buy his father a new pair of shoes. He didn't. He just upgraded Tiffany's car. Andre, who had been silent and sweating, suddenly spoke up as if trying to prove his worth. "I've actually been trying to convince Dad to sell this place. Like you said, Richard, the neighborhood is booming. It's gentrifying. He could sell this shack for a pretty penny, get him into a nice condo, something cleaner, more modern." I felt the slight sting. This shack, as he called it, was his childhood home. Tiffany, seeing her opening, seized it. She placed her knife and fork down with a delicate click. "Actually, Zay, we have a much better idea. Don't we, Mom?" Karen beamed, placing her hand on her husband's. "We do. We have the most wonderful news." Richard cleared his throat, taking charge. "Zay, as you know, we're based in Chicago, but we've fallen in love with Atlanta. We're tired of the cold." "So," Tiffany jumped in, unable to contain herself, "Mom and Dad have decided to move here permanently." "That's nice," I said, taking a sip of my sweet tea. "I'm sure Andre and Tiffany will enjoy having you close." "Oh, we will," Tiffany said. "But Zay, while they look for the perfect Buckhead mansion, which could take months, they need a place to stay, and hotel suites are just so impersonal." The table went quiet. I looked at Andre. He was staring at his plate, tracing the pattern on the china with his fingernail. He knew what was coming. "We were thinking," Karen said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "that you must be so lonely here, Zay, all alone in this big house. It's too much for one person." "It has 3 bedrooms, Richard added, as if this was the final irrefutable argument. "It's wasteful, really. We could move in next week." I just looked at them. Tiffany, seeing my hesitation, decided to deliver the final blow. "You can move all your things down to the basement, Zay. It's finished right. Mostly that way you still have your space. But Mom and Dad can have the main floor rooms, for their knees." They were talking about my room. They were talking about Althea's room. The room I had kept just as she left it. Her books, her sewing machine, her scent. They wanted me to move my wife's memory into the damp basement. I looked at my son. I gave him one last chance. Andre, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. What do you say about this? Andre fidgeted. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at Tiffany, then at her father. Well, Dad, it does make sense financially. You are alone and they need a place, and we could all be one big family. It's Thanksgiving after all. He had made his choice. I placed my napkin down on the table. I looked at Karen, at Richard, at Tiffany, and finally at the stranger sitting in my son's chair. No. Min Chuan Danong, Jem Tui Chin. The doorbell chimed a sharp, demanding sound that cut right through the quiet hum of my oven. Andre practically leaped over the sofa to answer it, plastering on a smile so wide it must have hurt his face. They're here. They're here. Dad, Tiff, be nice. He swung the door open. Richard, Karen, welcome, welcome, come on in. And in they walked, or rather they made an entrance. Karen was draped in a floor-length cashmere shawl the color of oatmeal. It was the kind of garment designed to look simple while costing more than a used car. Richard was a walking advertisement for boardroom arrogance. He wore a dark suit that was just a little too tight, but the star of the show was the Rolex on his wrist. It wasn't just a watch, it was a statement. A big, bright, gold-plated statement that screamed, "I have arrived." They paused on the welcome mat, not quite stepping in, just observing. "Oh," Karen said, her voice a high-pitched trill. "Andre, honey, this is it." Her eyes swept over my living room, the comfortable worn armchair where Althea used to read, the sturdy oak coffee table I built, the braided rug we bought at a flea market 20 years ago. It's charming. She finally landed on, and the word hung in the air like an insult. Richard was less subtle. He stepped inside, looked up at the original crown molding and said, "Wow, solid bones, lots of character. It's like stepping back in time, isn't it, honey?" "Completely," Karen agreed, clutching her Louis Vuitton bag to her chest as if she were afraid the air in my house might tarnish it. Tiffany rushed over, air-kissing both of them. "Mom! Dad, you made it. You remember Zay?" "Of course," Richard said, finally turning to me. He gave me that handshake, the one where he grips too hard to establish dominance but not hard enough to show respect. "Zay, good to see you. Still holding down the fort here in... what's this neighborhood again, Adair Park?" "It's home, Richard," I said, offering a simple, humble smile. I was playing the part they had written for me. "Welcome. Can I get you something to drink?" Karen looked panicked for a second, as if I'd offered her poison. "Oh, do you have any sparkling water, Perrier, or perhaps a San Pellegrino with a twist of lime?" I kept the smile. "I've got tap water filtered, or I can brew you a fresh pot of sweet tea." Tiffany winced, jumping in as if I'd committed a terrible social sin. "They'll just have water, Zay, in a glass. Thank you." She shot me a look that said, "Don't be poor." We moved to the dining room. I watched Karen run a finger over the surface of my oak table before she sat down. She pulled a small lace handkerchief from her purse and discreetly but obviously wiped the seat of the chair. I brought the turkey to the table. I had carved it in the kitchen. The skin was crisp, the meat juicy. Althea would have been proud. They stared at the food as if it were a science experiment. "Oh, homemade," Karen said. "How authentic." Richard took a small bite of the stuffing. "Good, simple, rustic. You know, we just got back from Tuscany. The food there, unbelievable. We had this truffle pasta." Tiffany, what was that restaurant? The one with the 3-month waiting list?" "Il Grotto Daddy," Tiffany said, her eyes lighting up. "It was divine." "Divine?" Richard repeated, swirling his glass of water as if it were wine. "They shaved the truffle right at your table. The whole thing must have cost, what, 500 euros for lunch, but it's about the experience." I just nodded and served the mashed potatoes. "Sounds lovely." I knew about that trip. Tiffany had Andre charge it to the discretionary corporate card, the one R&H Capital funds. I also know they didn't go to Il Grotto. They went to a tourist trap around the corner that claims to be Il Grotto, and they both got food poisoning. But why ruin his story? Karen took the smallest possible portion of turkey. "It's just so wonderful you still do all this, Zay, all by yourself." I don't think I've actually cooked a Thanksgiving meal in, oh, a decade. We always fly to Aspen. The club handles everything. It's just easier. The club in Aspen is nice, I said, playing along. I've heard of it. I've heard of it because R&H Capital financed their last expansion. They are currently 3 months behind on their interest payments. They are not flying to Aspen this year. Richard leaned forward, trying to find common ground man to man. So, Zay, Andre mentioned you're in property management. Is that right? A bit of landlording. Here it was. My cue. I gave him my most humble, slightly confused look. Oh, management is a strong word. I just look after a few small places. A duplex over in West End, a little 4-unit building near the old rail yard. You know, just collecting rents, fixing toilets. It keeps an old man busy. Richard chuckled a short, condescending sound. Right. Fixing toilets. Tough gig. I'm in finance myself. Mergers and acquisitions. He says mergers and acquisitions. What he means is he's a high-risk day trader who leverages his house, which is already underwater, on bad stock tips. I know this because the mortgage on that house is held by a bank my fund acquired 6 months ago. He is 2 weeks away from foreclosure. We just closed a massive deal in North Carolina, Richard boasted. $50 million, a real game changer. The bonus on that one alone. Let's just say Karen is getting a new Mercedes for Christmas. I put a slice of turkey on his plate. That's fascinating, Richard. Must be stressful. You didn't close that deal. My fund R&H Capital vetoed that acquisition last Tuesday because your due diligence was a joke. Your company's stock is going to tank on Monday when the news breaks. But please enjoy the turkey. Karen, sensing the conversation was too focused on her husband, steered it back to her achievements. Of course Richard works hard, but I'm the one who manages the real portfolio. Our investments. Tiffany gets her sharp mind from me. Oh, I asked, feigning interest. Oh yes, real estate. We have a lovely little condo in Miami, ocean views. And we're looking at a place in the Hamptons. You have to diversify, Zay. You can't just fix toilets. You should let Andre and Tiffany guide you. They know the market. The condo in Miami is a timeshare. She owns 2 weeks in September. The place in the Hamptons is her browsing Zillow. I know this because my private investigator who I put on them the second Andre announced his engagement is very, very good. I'll keep that in mind, I said. More yams. Andre, my son, had been silent for almost 10 minutes. He was just pushing food around his plate. He was ashamed of the worn finish on my dining table, ashamed of my simple cooking, ashamed of his toilet-fixing father. He was drowning in their sea of arrogance. And instead of swimming to shore, he was trying to impress them by drowning too. He suddenly cleared his throat, desperate to contribute to show that he too was on their level. Actually, Dad, he said, his voice a little too loud. We were talking about this house. Like you said, Richard, the neighborhood is, well, it's booming. It's gentrifying. Zillow estimates this place, this shack, is worth a pretty penny. He wouldn't look at me. He was talking at me for their benefit. I've been telling him he needs to sell, Andre continued, gaining confidence. Cash out, take that money and move into a nice managed condo, something cleaner, something more modern. He could invest the rest. Make his money work for him, right, Richard? Richard nodded sagely. Absolutely. Sitting on a depreciating asset. Well, in this case, an appreciating asset. Without leveraging it. That's just bad business, son. They were talking about my home, Althea's home, as an asset. Tiffany, seeing her opening, pounced. She placed her knife and fork down with a delicate click, a signal that the real dinner conversation was about to begin. Actually, Zay, she said, her voice dripping with fake predatory sweetness. We have a much better idea. Don't we, Mom? Karen beamed, placing her hand on her husband's arm as if they were about to announce a royal engagement. We do. We have the most wonderful news, don't we, Dickie? Richard cleared his throat, taking charge. He was the self-appointed patriarch of this new merged family. Zay, as you know, we're based in Chicago, but we've fallen in love with Atlanta. The business opportunities, the warmth. Frankly, we're tired of the cold. So, Tiffany jumped in, unable to contain her excitement. Mom and Dad have decided to move here permanently. She looked at me expecting, What applause. An old man's grateful tears. I kept my face neutral. I took another small bite of the pecan pie I'd baked. It tasted like ash. "That's nice," I said, my voice mild. "I'm sure Andre and Tiffany will enjoy having you close." "Oh, we will," Tiffany said, and her voice dropped into that syrupy, conspiratorial tone that always means she's about to ask for something she has no right to. "But Zay, while they look for the perfect Buckhead mansion which could take months, they need a place to stay, and hotel suites are just so impersonal, not to mention the expense." The table went quiet. This was it, the ambush, the real reason for this Thanksgiving dinner. I looked at Andre. He was staring at his plate again, tracing the pattern on the china with his fingernail. He knew what was coming. He was a coward. He was letting it happen. "We were thinking," Karen said, her voice dripping with a sympathy so fake it was insulting, "that you must be so lonely here, Zay, all alone in this big house." She gestured around my modest dining room. "It's really too much for one person to manage. The upkeep, the cleaning, the space." "It has 3 bedrooms, Richard added, leaning forward as if this was the final irrefutable argument. 3, it's wasteful, really. An inefficient use of prime real estate, if you ask me." I didn't ask him. "So we came up with the perfect common-sense solution," Tiffany announced, placing her hand over mine on the table. Her skin was cold. "Mom and Dad can move in here, with you." She smiled a wide, bright, terrifying smile, as if she had just solved all my life's problems. Andre finally looked up, a forced, sickly grin plastered on his face. "Yeah, Dad, think about it. You wouldn't be alone. The house would be full, like old times." Like old times. My blood ran cold. He dared to invoke the memory of Althea in this transaction. Karen, not waiting for my answer, was already redecorating in her head. "It's perfect. Richard and I can take the master bedroom, of course. It's the largest and it gets the morning light. And we can use the 3rd bedroom as our office. Richard needs a quiet place for his international calls." I said nothing. I just looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They were dividing up my home in front of me like vultures divvying up a carcass. I looked at the 3rd bedroom, Andre's old room. Then I looked at the master bedroom, my bedroom, the room I had shared with Althea for 40 years, the room where she passed away in my arms. "And what about me?" I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. I was playing the part they expected. The confused, weak old man. Tiffany laughed, a light, airy sound that was sharper than glass. "Oh, Zay, don't be silly. We'd never kick you out. You'd have your own private suite." "My private suite." "The basement," she announced, as if revealing a prize. "It's finished right. Mostly it's perfect for you. It's quiet. It has its own entrance. You can have your privacy and we can have ours. You can move all your things down there." "My things," I repeated. Richard nodded, taking a large swallow of water. "Exactly. All this clutter." He gestured vaguely at the living room. "All these antiques. You can store them down there. We'd want to redecorate, of course. Something more modern, minimalist. Karen has wonderful taste." "My things. My antiques." He was talking about Althea's reading chair, her sewing machine, the photographs on the wall, the very soul of my life. They wanted me to move my wife's memory into the damp, windowless basement so these strangers could have a place to stay while they hunted for a mansion. I looked at my son. I looked at Andre, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had sat with for hours teaching him about Martin and Malcolm, about dignity and self-respect. I gave him one last chance. "Andre," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table, "what do you say about this?" Andre fidgeted. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at Tiffany. Then at her father, Richard, the man with the fake finance job and the foreclosed house. "Well, Dad, it does make sense financially. You are alone and they need a place, and we could all be one big family. It's Thanksgiving after all." He had made his choice. He had sold his mother's memory for the approval of these empty, arrogant people. The anger I expected to feel didn't come. It wasn't hot. It was cold. It was the Arctic cold certainty of a decision being finalized. I placed my napkin down on the table next to the half-eaten pie. I looked at Karen, at Richard, at Tiffany, and finally at the stranger sitting in my son's chair. No. The word was not loud. It was not angry. It was quiet, deep, and absolute, like the closing of a bank vault. Silence. Complete, shocked, deafening silence. Richard, who had been leaning back in his chair, sat up straight. Karen's painted-on smile froze, then cracked. Andre looked up, his eyes wide with panic. Tiffany was the first to recover. Her face, which had been a mask of sweet concern, contorted. "What did you just say?" she hissed. I said no. I repeated, my voice just as calm. "This is my house. Your parents will not be moving in. Not next week. Not ever. They can rent a hotel or an apartment, like normal people." Tiffany stared at me. She had been refused perhaps for the first time in her life. She had challenged the poor old man, and the old man hadn't folded. The air in the room changed. The fake warmth of Thanksgiving evaporated. The underground storm had finally broken the surface. And I knew as I watched her knuckles turn white on her wine glass that the polite part of the evening was over. Tiffany's face didn't just fall, it collapsed. The mask of sweet, concerned daughter-in-law evaporated, revealing something ugly and raw underneath. Her eyes, which had been bright with fake concern, narrowed into slits. "What?" she hissed. The word was not a question. It was a threat. "What did you just say to me?" Richard and Karen stopped pretending to eat. They put their forks down, the metallic scrape loud in the sudden silence. The audience was ready for the show. Andre looked from me to his wife, his face pale, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. I said no. I repeated, my voice still quiet, but the coldness in it was unmistakable. "This is my house. Your parents will not be moving in. Not next week. Not ever. They can rent a hotel or an apartment, like normal people." The blood rushed to Tiffany's face. She stood up so fast her chair scraped violently against the floor, the sound like a scream. "You old egoist!" she shrieked. The volume was shocking, echoing off the low ceilings of my small dining room. "You selfish, selfish old man." I just looked at her. I didn't flinch. This was the real Tiffany. The one I had seen glimpses of for 2 years, the one my investigator had warned me about, the one Andre had refused to see. "Who do you think you are?" she continued, her voice rising with every word, becoming shrill and ugly. "Sitting here in this dump, wasting all this space. My parents," she gestured wildly to Richard and Karen, "are offering you company. They are offering to help you. And you throw it back in their face." "I don't need their help, Tiffany," I said simply. "Oh, you need it," she spat. "You just don't know it. You're a burden. You've always been a burden on Andre. He's had to apologize for you his entire life, apologize for his poor, simple-minded father who supposedly fixes toilets for a living. Andre, my son just sat there. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He was studying the gravy on his plate as if it held the secrets of the universe." "We are trying to give you an option," Tiffany screamed, stepping closer. "We are trying to manage you, and all you can do is be selfish. It's all about you, isn't it? Your house, your memories, your dead wife." I felt my hands clench under the table. She had crossed the line. "What about our future?" she demanded. "What about Andre's future? He's stuck taking care of you for the rest of his life. He could be so much more if he wasn't anchored to this shack and the ghost you keep in it." I looked past her at her parents. Richard leaned forward slightly, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. Karen had her hand over her mouth, not in shock, but to hide her satisfaction. This was exactly what they wanted. They wanted the old fool to be put in his place. I looked at Tiffany. She was breathing hard, her face red and blotchy under her expensive makeup. She had invested everything in this plan. She saw her future, the Buckhead mansion, the designer clothes, the validation, all contingent on getting her hands on my assets, and I, the simple old man in the way, had just said no. "Tiffany," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "sit down. You are making a fool of yourself." That was the wrong thing to say. "I'll show you," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "I'll show you, selfish." Before I could react, before Andre could even look up, she grabbed her plate. The good china, Althea's china, the one with the little blue flowers she had picked out. It was still piled high with half-eaten turkey cranberry sauce and thick brown gravy. "Tiffany! No!" Andre finally yelled, starting to rise, but it was too late. She flung it. She wasn't aiming at me. She was aiming at the wall behind me. I flinched as the heavy plate sailed past my head. It shattered against the wall with a sickening final crash. Porcelain fragments exploded outward like shrapnel. But the food, the heavy, wet, greasy mass of turkey and gravy, it hit its target perfectly. It splattered directly across the 8x10 wedding photograph of me and Althea. The room went completely, utterly silent. The only sound was the drip, drip, drip of gravy running down my wife's smiling face. A piece of cranberry bright red stuck to her eye like a tear of blood. My heart didn't break. It stopped. Everything went cold. The sounds of the room, the smell of the food, the faces of my family. They all receded, replaced by a white-hot, silent rage that was so profound, it felt like peace. This wasn't just an insult anymore. This was a desecration. This was a declaration of war. I turned my head very, very slowly and looked at my son. Andre was staring at the wall, his mouth open. He looked horrified. "Tiff, why would you do that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "She deserved it," Tiffany shrieked now, completely unhinged, her victory making her bold. "She's dead. Who cares about her stupid picture? We are alive. Our needs matter. This house is ours." I kept my eyes on Andre. This was his moment. His last chance. Defend his mother's memory or side with this creature. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the fear of his wife, the shame, the greed, the weakness. And then I saw him make his choice. He turned away from the wall. He turned away from his mother's defiled photograph. And he looked at me. His face, which had been pale with shock, hardened, mimicking his wife's. "She's right," he said. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. "What?" I whispered. "She's right," Andre shouted, standing up now, his voice cracking. "You are selfish. You're always selfish. All you do is hold us back with the past, with her, with this museum." He pointed at the gravy-covered picture. "I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being the poor son. I'm sick of this house. I'm sick of you." The words hit me harder than the plate. This was my son, the boy I had raised, the boy I had protected. "Andre," I said, my voice failing. "No," he yelled, his face contorted. He was crying now, but they were tears of rage, not sadness, tears of weakness. "It's my turn. It's our turn. And if you're not going to help us, then you're against us." He stepped away from me and stood beside Tiffany. He put his arm around her, a united front. "She is my wife," he screamed, pointing at Tiffany as if she were a trophy. "My family. And you're just an old man who won't get out of the way." He took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked me dead in the eye. "Don't call me your son anymore." I looked past them, past the two broken, hateful people standing where my family used to be. I looked at Richard and Karen. They weren't just watching anymore. They were smiling. Richard had a look of smug, satisfied victory on his face. He leaned over to Karen, whispering something in her ear. She let out a small, cruel titter. A laugh. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was broken. They had successfully turned the son against the father. The house was theirs. They had witnessed an act of profound emotional violence, a son disowning his father and desecrating his mother's memory, and they were pleased. It was in that moment I knew. There would be no mercy. There would be no second chances. There would only be the consequences. I looked past them, past the two broken, hateful people standing where my family used to be. I looked at Richard and Karen. They weren't just watching anymore. They were smiling. Richard, that bankrupt shell of a man, had a look of smug, satisfied victory on his face. He leaned over to Karen, whispering something in her ear. She let out a small, cruel titter. A laugh. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was broken. They had successfully turned the son against the father. The house was theirs. They had witnessed an act of profound emotional violence, a son disowning his father and desecrating his mother's memory, and they were pleased. It was in that moment I knew. There would be no mercy. There would be no second chances. There would only be the consequences. The rage, it didn't explode. I had expected shouting, maybe tears. Instead, it imploded. It collapsed into a tiny, dense point of absolute cold. It felt clear. For the first time in 2 years, ever since Andre met this woman, I felt perfectly, terrifyingly clear. I turned my head slowly. I looked at the wall, at the shattered pieces of Althea's china on the floor. I looked at the thick brown gravy dripping steadily down the glass of her photograph. Drip, drip, drip. It was the only sound in the room. Tiffany was breathing heavily, her chest puffed up with victory. Andre was trembling, a mixture of adrenaline and fear in his eyes. He had just disowned his father. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. I looked at him. My son. The boy who fell asleep on my chest watching football games. The boy whose college tuition I paid not from my pension, but from a single dividend check he never knew about. The man who just traded his birthright for the approval of 2 morally vacant snobs. I didn't see my son anymore. I saw a liability, a failed investment, a stranger. And then I did something they didn't expect. I smiled. It wasn't a big smile, it was just a small lift at the corner of my mouth, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a smile that said, I see you, and the transaction is complete. The effect was immediate. Tiffany's triumphant expression faltered. Karen stopped smirking. A flicker of confusion, of fear crossed their faces. A shouting old man they understood. A crying old man they could manage. A smiling old man. That was not in their plan. I slowly, calmly picked up my cloth napkin from my lap. I placed it on the table next to my half-eaten pie. Well, I said. My voice was even, quiet. The voice of a man confirming a business deal. Thank you for Thanksgiving dinner, Andre, Tiffany. This was truly memorable. I pushed my chair back. The sound of the wood scraping the floor was deafening in the silence. I stood up. I didn't straighten my old sweater. I didn't look at the mess on the wall again. I just turned and began to walk toward my bedroom. Dad. Andre said, his voice suddenly small. Dad, where are you going? I'm talking to you. Don't let him walk away, Tiffany hissed. He thinks he can just leave. We're not done with you, old man. We need to settle this, about the house. I kept walking. Each step was measured. I heard Andre get up and follow me, his footsteps clumsy. Dad, wait, you can't just ignore us, he pleaded, grabbing my arm. I stopped. I didn't turn my whole body. I just turned my head. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. He snatched it back as if he'd touched a hot stove. You told me not to call you son anymore, I said, my voice still quiet. I am respecting your wishes. You are Andre. I am Isaiah. We are no longer family. We are just roommates, and I am retiring to my room. You can't be serious, he stammered, his face pale. Andre, darling, let him go, Karen called from the table, her confidence returning. Let the old fool have his tantrum. He'll come crawling back when he's hungry. He has nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go. I almost laughed. If she only knew. I continued walking down the short hallway to my bedroom. I stepped inside. I put my hand on the doorknob. You lock that door, Zay, and you'll regret it, Tiffany threatened from the dining room. This isn't over. Oh, you're right, Tiffany, I thought. It's not over. It's just beginning. But it's not the beginning you think it is. I closed the door. I turned the old-fashioned brass lock. The heavy click echoed in the small room. I was no longer a victim. I was the enforcer. The silence in my room was absolute. I stood in the dark for a full minute, just breathing. Mourning. I was mourning the son I had just lost. The boy Althea and I had raised was gone, replaced by the weak, greedy stranger in the dining room. The grief was sharp, but it was quick. It was replaced by the cold, clean logic of necessity. They had desecrated Althea's memory. They had disowned me. They had tried to steal my home. They had mistaken my simplicity for stupidity. It was time to remove the mask, not just for me, but for Althea. I ignored their pounding. The wood of my bedroom door was thick, solid, built to last. I built it myself back when Andre was a baby to give Althea a quiet place to read. Now it was my sanctuary. I walked over to my old creaking wooden desk, the one Andre and Tiffany probably planned to sell for pennies at an estate sale. It looked simple, maybe worth $50, but Althea's father had been a cabinet maker, and he'd taught me a few tricks. I pressed my thumb against a specific knot in the dark oak. It wasn't a knot, it was a release. A near-silent click echoed in the room, and a small hidden compartment in the side panel of the desk slid open. Inside, nestled on velvet, was not a cheap burner phone. It was a military-grade satellite phone. encrypted, untraceable, and directly linked to one number. This was not the phone of Isaiah Zay Riggs, the simple retired landlord. This was the phone of the chairman. I powered it on. The screen glowed a cold blue light in the dim room. I put it to my ear. It didn't dial. It simply connected. One ring. A voice answered, not with hello, but with a simple ready, Zay. It was Terrence Morgan, my brother, not by blood. We had met 50 years ago, two ambitious young black men in a world that didn't want to make room for us, so we built our own. Terry was the public face of R&H Capital, the brilliant, charismatic 6'4" CEO, the one who graced the covers of Forbes and Black Enterprise, the one Andre, my son, idolized from afar as the big boss. Andre had spent the last 5 years trying to get Terry's attention, not knowing Terry reported to me every single day. I was the ghost, the founder, the majority shareholder. The H in R&H stood for Hayes, Althea's maiden name. It was always for her. Terry, I said. My voice was steady. I'm listening, he replied. His voice was normally a warm baritone, but now it was pure steel. He knew this call. We had rehearsed this. How is the turkey, Zay? Dry, I said. And the company was worse. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. Terry had warned me. He had run the background checks on Tiffany's family the day Andre announced the engagement. He knew Richard was drowning in debt. He knew Tiffany had a history of social climbing. He knew they were leeches. He just waited for me to see it for myself. Zay, he said softly. What did they do? Everything is just as you said. Terry, everything. They want the house. They want me in the basement. I paused, my throat tightening for just a second. And she threw the Thanksgiving plate at Althea's picture. The silence on the other end was no longer respectful. It was absolute deadly. When Terry spoke again, his voice had lost all its warmth. It was the voice that dismantled corporations. Protocol, he asked. Just one word. Activate the Sunset Recall Protocol, I said. This was our contingency plan, the one we designed for catastrophic breaches of trust. Sunset Recall meant exactly what it sounded like. The sun was setting on their fabricated lives. It was an immediate digital and financial execution. Immediate effect, Terry asked. Immediate. Freeze everything. Now. Confirming, Terry said. I could hear the faint, rapid click, click, click of his keyboard in his home office across town. Andre Riggs. Corporate black card. Frozen. Company vehicle the BMW 7 Series. Recall notice issued. Access to the executive fund. Frozen. The penthouse lease. The R&H corporate guarantee is pulled. He'll get the notification from the leasing office in 30 seconds. His employment at Apex Real Estate is terminated effective immediately. He is no longer a director. Good, I said. Richard, Terry continued, his voice like ice. The $5 million angel loan to his interior design firm. We are calling it in. Clause 12B, breach of trust. Our legal team will notify his bank in the morning, but his corporate line of credit, the one R&H co-signed on, it is frozen, as of now. And Karen, her supplemental card tied to Richard's account, canceled. Thank you, Terry, that's all. Zay, Terry hesitated. Are you all right? This is Andre. This is your son. I looked at the closed door. The pounding had started again, more frantic this time. No, I said. My son died tonight. I'm just handling the estate. I ended the call. I placed the satellite phone back in its hidden compartment. I closed the false panel. The click was satisfyingly final. I stood up and walked to the door, placing my ear against the cool, solid wood. Outside, the sounds had changed. The angry pounding had stopped. It was replaced by a new sound. A high-pitched, confused wail. What do you mean declined? It was Tiffany. I leaned my head against the door and closed my eyes, just listening. Declined! Declined! She shrieked. I just used it this morning. Try it again. It's a black card, you idiot. It doesn't decline. I heard the muffled sound of her talking to someone on her phone, probably a credit card concierge. What do you mean, account frozen? By who? By R&H Capital. What does Andre's father have to do with R&H Capital? A new sound. A gasp. It was Richard. Karen, the bank. Just... my line of credit. It's gone. They're calling the loan. And then Andre. A low, hollow moan that was barely human. Tiff, my email, it's from corporate. Notice of immediate termination. My car... they're recalling the lease on the penthouse. We have to be out by 9 a.m. The screaming started then. Not anger anymore. It was the raw, panicked sound of people who had just stepped off a cliff they didn't know was there. Zay! Tiffany shrieked, hammering on my door with both fists. Zay! What did you do? You old bastard, what did you do? I just stood there listening to the beautiful sound of consequences. It was 7:32 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, 10 minutes after I made the call. Their world was already over. They just hadn't hit the ground yet. I let them scream. I let them pound on the door until their knuckles must have been raw. I heard Tiffany shrieking, "I'm calling the police! He's stolen our identities!" Then I heard Richard's panicked, muffled voice. "Don't call anyone, just wait." They were terrified. Good. I let the silence stretch for another full minute, letting that terror marinate. Then when the pounding had stopped and been replaced by frantic, high-pitched whispering, I calmly unlocked the door. I opened it. All four of them stumbled back as if they had been leaning against the solid wood. They looked like ghosts. Tiffany's face was blotchy, her mascara running down her cheeks. Richard looked like he was genuinely having a heart attack, his hand clutching his chest as he panted. Karen was just weeping silently, her hands twisting the cashmere shawl. And Andre, my son. He looked at me as if I were a stranger, a monster who had just emerged from the shadows. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Dad, what did you do? What is happening?" He held up his phone, his hand shaking so badly he could barely read the screen. "My corporate card is frozen. My salary account is locked. The bank they just sent a recall notice for the BMW. They're saying it's a breach of contract. What did you do?" I looked at him. No pity, no warmth, just a cold, hard assessment. "I didn't do anything, Andre. I just stopped preventing things from happening. Those aren't your accounts. That isn't your car." "What are you talking about?" He almost yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm a director. I earned those things." "No," I said, my voice cutting through his panic like a razor. "You were given those things. They are perks, assets belonging to R&H Capital, and R&H Capital has decided to recall them." Tiffany, who had been staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred, finally found her voice. It was a low, venomous hiss. What do you know about R&H Capital? What do you know about anything?" She stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward my chest. She was still on the attack, still too arrogant to see the trap she was in. "You're just a bitter, jealous old man. You couldn't stand seeing him succeed, so what you called his office, you told them some lie, you got him in trouble." She laughed a sharp, ugly sound. "You think you have any power here, you fix toilets, you're a nobody. Andre is a director. He reports to Terrence Morgan. You know who that is. He's the most powerful black man in this city. He'll fix this. He'll have you arrested for this." Andre nodded, grabbing onto that sliver of hope, his eyes desperate. "She's right. I'll call Terry. I'll call him right now. He respects me. He'll straighten this out. He'll tell them you're just a confused old man who doesn't know what he's doing." I almost smiled. This was the moment, the pivot, the exact point where the world they knew would end. "That's an interesting idea, Andre," I said. "You should call Terry." I paused, letting him almost dial. "But I doubt he'll take your call. He's very busy. He works for me." Andre froze his phone halfway to his ear. "What did you say?" Richard and Karen looked at me like I had just grown a second head. I repeated, stepping out of the bedroom and into the center of the living room, that Terrence Morgan works for me, as do you, or rather, as you did. Tiffany shook her head, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning catastrophic horror. "No, what are you talking about? That's not possible." "You keep asking what I know about R&H Capital," I said, looking directly at her, savoring the moment her arrogance finally shattered. "R&H, Riggs and Hayes. Hayes was my wife's maiden name, Althea Hayes. I am Isaiah Riggs. I am the founder, the chairman, and the 51% controlling shareholder of R&H Capital and all its subsidiaries, including Apex Real Estate where my son used to work. I let the words land. The silence in the room was no longer just silence. It was a vacuum. It sucked all the air, all the color, all the sound out of their world. Richard was the first to make a noise, a small choking sound. No, that's impossible. The founder of R&H is a recluse, a myth. Nobody knows who he is. They do now, I said. I stepped back from public life 10 years ago when my wife passed away. I let Terry, my brother, as you heard me call him, run the public side of the company. I wanted to see if my son, without the pressure of my name or my money, could become a good man. The man Althea and I raised. I turned my gaze to Andre. He was leaning against the wall, sliding down it. He looked like he couldn't breathe. And for the last 5 years, I continued, I have watched him. I have watched him try to impress a man, Terry, who reports to me every single morning. I have watched him become ashamed of the house I let him grow up in. I have watched him stand by silent while his wife and her family planned to steal my home, planned to put me in a basement. I looked at Tiffany. Her face was ashen. She was looking at me, but she was seeing her entire future dissolve. You wanted to know what I know, Tiffany. I know that you and Andre are $140,000 in personal debt, not counting the corporate perks you've been abusing. I know that your high-powered father's company is leveraged to the hilt and is 3 weeks from defaulting on a $5 million loan that my fund holds. I know that your mother's Ocean View condo in Miami is a 2-week timeshare in September. I know everything about you. I have been letting you live in my world under my protection funded by my generosity, and in return you threw gravy on my wife's picture. Andre was on the floor now, his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. No. Yes, I said. So let's be very clear about what happens next, because this isn't a discussion. I pointed a finger at my son. Andre, as of 7:32 p.m. this evening, your employment with Apex Real Estate is terminated. For cause, gross moral turpitude and breach of fiduciary trust. You will not be receiving severance. You will not be receiving a recommendation. The penthouse on Peachtree, the lease was guaranteed by R&H Capital. That guarantee is revoked. The building management will be sliding an eviction notice under your door as we speak. You have, according to the lease, you never read 12 hours to vacate the premises. The BMW 7 Series. The one Tiffany was driving this morning. It's a corporate asset. A tow truck is already on its way to retrieve it from my driveway. I suggest you get your purse out of it. It's blocking my neighbor's car. And the black card. And the platinum cards. And the expense accounts. They are all gone. I looked at the 4 of them, a family of ruins. You wanted my house? You wanted me in the basement? Well, now you have no house at all. Tiffany didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stared at me, her mind clearly unable to process the speed of her own destruction. She had bet everything on the assumption that I was weak, poor, and stupid. And she had just lost the entire world. Tiffany was a statue of shattered arrogance. Andre was just a heap on the floor, rocking and muttering, no. But it was Richard, the financier, the mergers and acquisitions man, who finally processed the name. His face, which had been smug and ruddy, turned a sickly gray-white. It was the color of old oatmeal. R&H Capital, he stammered, his voice suddenly weak. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me at the ghost of his own financial ruin. You're that Riggs, the R in R&H. I didn't answer. I just watched him. But that's... He fumbled, looking at his wife, Karen. Honey, R&H. That's the fund. The one that... Oh my God. Karen looked at him confused. What, Dickie? What is it? What fund? The loan, he whispered, his voice cracking. The $5 million loan. He finally looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. The fake Rolex on his wrist seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. All I saw was pure, undiluted terror. He was seeing the guillotine. I decided it was time to drop the blade. I turned my full attention to him, walking slowly past my weeping son and my frozen daughter-in-law. I stood in front of Richard. Your company, Richard, I said, my voice quiet. The interior design firm. Richard's Interiors. It's still doing well, I hope. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head slightly. That's a shame, I said, because I remember when it wasn't doing well. I remember it quite clearly, 3 years ago. I let the memory hang in the air. I looked at Tiffany. You were engaged then, weren't you, Tiffany? You had just met my son, and your father was about to lose everything. Tiffany looked confused. What, no? My dad's always been successful. Successful? I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Your father was bankrupt. He was leveraged to the hilt on bad real estate deals. He was about to lose his company, his house, everything. He was a week away from total ruin. You're lying, Tiffany shrieked her default defense. Am I? I turned back to Richard. Tell her, Richard. Tell her about the night you came to Andre's penthouse, the night you begged him for help, not knowing you were really begging me. Andre looked up from the floor. He remembered. Dad, that was you, I thought my boss just pulled a string. Your boss did nothing, I said. You came to me, Andre. You said your new girlfriend's father was a good man who made some bad bets. You said he just needed a chance. You begged me to look into it. You said if I could just fix it, you'd be set for life with her family. I looked at my son with utter contempt. You sold me out for a family that wasn't even solvent. You prostituted your father's influence before you even knew it was your father's influence. I didn't know, Andre whimpered from the floor. No, I agreed. You didn't. So I looked into it. I had Terry look into Richard's books. They were a disaster. No bank on earth would have touched him. He was finished. Karen was holding her husband's arm. Dickie, what is he talking about? But I saw an opportunity. I continued, ignoring her. Not a financial one, a personal one. My son's happiness, or so I thought. So R&H Capital extended a goodwill loan, $5 million, not as an investment, as a lifeline. We bought his debt. We restructured his company. We saved him. Richard finally found his voice. It was a desperate, pleading whisper. It was an investment, Isaiah, Mr. Riggs. It was a good investment. The company is turning around. I'm just about to post a profit, I said. Profit? That's impressive. Especially since my investigators told me you spent $60,000 of that loan on that Rolex, and another $100,000 on Karen's new car, and, what was it, $300,000 on your daughter's perfect wedding, the one you couldn't actually afford. Richard went silent. You took my goodwill money, I said, my voice dropping. Money meant to save your company, and you used it to buy the props for this performance, this charade of wealth. You used my money to come into my house and call me poor. I was going to pay it back, he stammered. The contract, it's a 10-year note. Ah, yes, the contract, I said. I walked over to the bookshelf past the defiled picture of Althea. I pulled out a simple leather-bound book. It wasn't a book. It was a file holder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. I keep copies of my charity work, I said. You signed this, Richard, you and I both, 3 years ago. I held it up. A 10-year note, you're right, with a very generous interest rate. But you never read the fine print, did you, Richard? You were too desperate. What fine print? Karen asked, her voice trembling. Clause 12B, I said, reading from the paper. The morality clause, or as I like to call it, the don't be a snake clause. It's a personal clause I put into all my private loans. I looked him right in the eyes. It states that the full principal and accrued interest of the loan, all $5 million plus interest, becomes due immediately within 24 hours upon a catastrophic breach of trust against the lender or the lender's immediate family. And the determination of that breach is at the sole discretion of the lender. Richard's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of the dining chair to hold himself up. That's not legal, he sputtered. My legal team, the best in the country, drafted it themselves. It is ironclad, I said. And for 3 years you've been fine. You've been paying your minimums. You've been playing the part of the successful businessman I saved. I took a step toward him. And then you came here tonight. You sat at my table. You ate my food. You watched your daughter throw that food at my dead wife's picture. You watched your daughter's husband, my son, disown me. And you smiled. I pointed my finger at him. You sat right there in my house, a house built on love. And you plotted. You plotted to kick me out. You plotted to steal my home. You plotted to throw me in the basement. I let the accusation fill the room. And you, Richard, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, you did it while knowing my money was the only thing keeping you from living on the street. You are the definition of a snake. You bit the hand that fed you. I looked him dead in the eye. And as the sole discretionary lender, I am determining that this entire night has been a catastrophic breach of trust. The loan is called. All of it. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to pay R&H Capital $5.2 million, or we seize everything. Your company, your house, your wife's jewelry. It's over. Karen didn't just faint this time. She collapsed. A full deadweight collapse, her cashmere shawl puddling around her on the floor. Richard didn't even notice. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, making no sound. He was a man who had just been executed. And I felt nothing. No, that's a lie. I felt something. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a long overdue debt being paid. I felt Althea's memory being honored. I looked back at Tiffany. She was no longer screaming. She was just gone. Her eyes were vacant. She was looking at her father, who was trying to shake her mother awake on my floor. Mom, Dickie, what's wrong with her? Wake up. Tiffany's mind was frantically doing the math. No penthouse, no BMW. No director's salary, no father with a successful company, no Hampton's house, no Aspen Club. It was all gone, every pillar of the life she thought she had secured. I had just pulled them all out at once. She wasn't just marrying Andre, the promising young director. She had married nothing. A fired, broke, disinherited man. I walked past her. She didn't even flinch. I walked over to the wall. Andre was still on the floor, his back against the wall, his head buried in his knees. He was weeping, gut-wrenching, broken sobs, the sobs of a child who finally understands he has made an irreversible mistake. I stood over him. He flinched when my shadow covered him. Get up, Andre, I said. It wasn't a request. He looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and snot. Dad, please. I didn't mean it. They pressured me. I love you, Dad. Please. It was pathetic. He was still trying to find an excuse, still trying to blame someone else. You love me? I asked. My voice was genuinely curious. You love me. You loved me when you let your wife demand my dead wife's picture be taken off the wall. You loved me when you agreed to throw me in the basement. You loved me when you stood by and watched her throw a plate of food at that picture. You loved me when you screamed at me not to call you son anymore. I was angry, he cried. I was confused. They make me feel small, and you always made me feel small too. Hiding, all this. I didn't make you feel small, I said. I gave you a chance to be big. I gave you a life without the burden of my wealth. I gave you the chance to build your own character, to be a man on your own terms. And this is what you built. A man who sides with monsters because they wear expensive clothes. A man who trades his mother's memory for a pat on the head from a bankrupt fool. I looked down at him, my son, my greatest failure. It's over, Andre. The money, the job, the life you thought you had. It's gone. He grabbed my pants leg like a child. But what do I do? Where do I go? We have nowhere to go. We're ruined. The door, which was still open, suddenly framed a new figure. It was Terry. He wasn't in a suit. He was in his Thanksgiving clothes, a comfortable sweater slacks. He looked like he had just come from his own family dinner. Behind him stood two very large men in dark, simple suits. They were not smiling. Terry, I said, nodding. Zay, he replied. His voice warm, but his eyes cold as ice as he surveyed the room. He took in the broken plate, the gravy on Althea's picture, Karen on the floor, Richard hyperventilating against the chair, Tiffany a living statue of shock, and Andre weeping at my feet. He didn't need to ask. He saw it all. "Everything is handled, Zay," he said. "The accounts are frozen. The recall notices are sent. The loan is called." He looked at the four of them, the intruders. "I believe," he said, "it is time for you to leave." Richard was still frozen, his back against the dining chair, staring at me. His face was a mask of disbelief. He was still trying to do the math, trying to find a way out, trying to rationalize how the toilet fixer could be the man who held his entire life in his hands. Andre was still weeping on the floor. Tiffany was looking back and forth between her father and her husband, her mind spinning, trying to figure out which horse to back, only to realize both were lame. And then a sound. A sharp, jarring electronic ringtone cut through the heavy silence. It wasn't my phone. It wasn't Andre's. It was Richard's. He fumbled for it, his hands shaking violently. He looked at the caller ID. His eyes went wide. It was his bank, the main bank. He put the phone to his ear, his hand trembling. "Hello? Yes, this is Richard." He listened. I watched his face. The last vestiges of color drained from it. He didn't just look pale. He looked translucent, like a man seeing a ghost. "What? Do you mean immediately?" He whispered, his voice dry. He listened again. "No, that's a 10-year note. You can't just call it—" He listened. "Clause 12B. He almost choked on the words. "What breach of trust?" That's a private matter. That has nothing to do with—" He looked at me. His eyes were screaming. He knew. He knew I was listening. He knew I had already done it. "But $5 million, he sputtered into the phone. "I don't have that, not liquid. I need time. You can't just seize the assets. You can't freeze the accounts." A longer pause. He was getting the final verdict. "What do you mean, it's already done?" he shrieked. The sound was high-pitched, pathetic. "It's Thanksgiving. You can't do this on Thanksgiving." He wasn't talking to the banker anymore. He was pleading with the universe. "My house, my wife's accounts. They're tied to the everything. You've frozen everything." He dropped the phone. It clattered to the hardwood floor. He grabbed his throat. "Dickie," Karen said, her voice small. "Dickie, what is it? Tell them it's a mistake." Richard looked at her, his eyes vacant. "They did it," he whispered. He wasn't lying. "They've frozen everything. The business account, our savings, your card, the mortgage. They're calling the loan. We're ruined, Karen. We're ruined." Karen stared at him. She didn't understand. She couldn't. This was not the world she lived in. In her world, the bills just got paid. The cars just appeared. The jewelry was just there. "Ruined," she repeated with a small, confused laugh. "Don't be silly, Dickie. Just call the other bank, the one in Switzerland." "That was the other bank," he whispered. "It's all tied together. He owned the debt. It was his money." Karen looked at her husband. Then she looked at me. I was just standing there watching. My arms crossed. She understood. Her eyes rolled back into her head. Her perfectly coiffed hair didn't even move as she slumped sideways off the dining chair. She didn't faint elegantly. She collapsed. A dead weight. Her head hit the oak floor with a sickening, heavy thud. "Mom!" Tiffany shrieked, rushing over to her mother. "Mom, wake up! What did he do to you? What did he do?" She knelt beside her mother, shaking her. "Dickie, do something, call 911. Richard didn't move. He was a statue of his own failure. He just stared at the wall where Althea's picture hung, the gravy now congealing. Tiffany, realizing no help was coming from her father, turned her rage on the only person left standing. Me. She scrambled to her feet. Her expensive white pantsuit was stained with gravy from where she'd knelt on the floor. Her hair was coming undone. She was a cornered animal. "You!" she screamed, lunging at me. "You did this, you liar, you monster!" She started hitting my chest with her fists. They were weak, pathetic blows, like a child having a tantrum. "You tricked us. You pretended to be poor. You set us up. This was a trap." I didn't even raise my hands. I just let her hit me. "You're a liar," she sobbed, her blows becoming weaker. "A cruel, evil, lying old man. Andre, help me. He's ruined us. He's ruined everything." Andre was still on the floor. He hadn't moved. He was just gone, rocking back and forth, his face buried in his knees. He was weeping, gut-wrenching, broken sobs. The sobs of a child who finally understands he has made an irreversible mistake. He was useless. To her, to me, to himself. "It's over, Tiffany," I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. I caught her wrists. Her skin was cold. "It's done." "It's not over," she shrieked, trying to twist free. "I'll tell everyone. I'll tell them what you did. I'll sue you. You'll tell them what exactly." The new voice cut through the chaos like a surgeon's scalpel. It was deep. It was calm. It was absolute. Tiffany froze. She stopped struggling. Even Andre stopped sobbing. I let go of Tiffany's wrists. I turned. Standing in my open front door was Terrence Morgan. He wasn't in a suit. He was in his Thanksgiving clothes. A comfortable dark maroon sweater, black slacks. He looked like he had just come from his own family dinner. But his presence filled the small house, sucking all the air out of it. Behind him, flanking the doorway, stood two very large men. They were in simple dark suits. They were not smiling. They were R&H security. "Terry," I said, nodding. "Zay," he replied. His voice was warm when he spoke to me. "I apologize for the interruption. I trust dinner was eventful." His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail in less than a second. The broken plate, the gravy on Althea's picture, Karen still unconscious on the floor, Richard hyperventilating against the chair, Tiffany a living statue of shock, and Andre weeping at my feet. He didn't need to ask. He saw it all. The story was written on the walls. Tiffany stared at him. This was the man she and Andre idolized, the big boss, the one she had name-dropped. He was here, in this shack. "Mr. Morgan," she stammered, her mind scrambling. "What are you doing here? This is a private family matter." Terry looked at her, and for the first time Tiffany saw what I saw. She saw the man who didn't just run R&H Capital. She saw the man who protected its founder. "Ma'am," Terry said, and his voice was no longer warm. It was ice. "You are in the home of the chairman of my board. This is not a family matter. This is a corporate security matter. You, all of you." He looked at Richard, who flinched. He looked at Karen, who was starting to groan on the floor. "Have committed an act of aggression against the primary stakeholder of R&H Capital. My presence here is non-negotiable." He looked past them, his eyes finding me. "Everything is handled, Zay," he said, his voice softening again. "The accounts are frozen, the recall notices are sent, the loan is called, the termination is filed, the tow truck is 1 block away." He then looked at the 4 intruders, the parasites. "I believe," he said, his voice dropping into a register of pure final authority, "it is time for you to leave." Terry's words hung in the air, cold and final. "I believe it is time for you to leave." Richard, the mergers and acquisitions man, didn't protest. He didn't have the leverage. He didn't have any power. He was just a man in a wrinkled suit who had lost a $5 million gamble. He stumbled over to his wife Karen, who was now sitting up on the floor, her cashmere shawl covered in dust. "Dickie," she whimpered. "Dickie, my head hurts. What happened?" "We're leaving, Karen," Richard muttered, pulling her to her feet. She was dazed, her eyes unfocused. One of Terry's large security men didn't touch them, but he stood by the open front door, a clear and menacing invitation. Richard and Karen stumbled out into the Thanksgiving night, not as conquerors but as refugees. Now only Tiffany and Andre remained. Tiffany was still frozen, a statue of pure, unadulterated shock. "Ma'am," the second security man said, his voice polite but firm. "Mr. Morgan asked you to leave." Tiffany looked at him. Then she looked at Andre, who was still a weeping heap on the floor. Then she looked at me. Her mind was finally catching up, processing the total and absolute destruction of her life. "No," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "No. Andre, do something. You can't let them do this. It's your house, too." Andre didn't even look up. He was just rocking, muttering to himself. "It's all gone. It's all gone." "He can't do anything, Tiffany," I said, my voice tired. "He doesn't live here anymore. And neither do you. Terry, please make sure she retrieves her purse from the BMW before the tow truck hooks it up. It's blocking my neighbor's driveway." "Andre," she shrieked one last time, a desperate final plea. When he didn't respond, her face changed. The shock was burned away by a pure, venomous hatred. She looked at me, her eyes dead. "You will rot in this house alone, you old bastard. You'll die here and no one will even know." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," I said. "Goodbye, Tiffany." The security man gently but firmly took her arm. She didn't fight this time. She was empty. She stumbled out the front door, her high heels catching on the welcome mat Althea had stitched 40 years ago. The door clicked shut. The house was silent again. Terry looked at Andre, who was still a puddle of misery on the floor. He looked at me, his eyes asking the question. "I'll handle this one, Terry," I said. "You've done enough. Thank you, my brother." Terry nodded. He walked over to the wall and looked at the desecrated picture of Althea. His jaw tightened. He knew her. He loved her too. "He deserves this, Zay," he said quietly. "Don't go soft." "The softness," I replied, "is all gone." Terry and his men left, closing the door softly behind them. I was alone again in my home, alone with the wreckage, the broken china, the spilled congealing food, and the broken man who was my son. I didn't speak to him. I walked right past him. I went to the dining room wall. I looked at the mess. The dark gravy had congealed. The bright red of the cranberry sauce looked like a wound against the plaster. Very carefully, my hands steady, I reached out and touched the simple wooden frame. I unhooked the picture of Althea and me from the nail. I carried it to the dining table, the one I had built. I laid it flat. I took a clean napkin from the pile and began very gently to wipe the gravy off her smiling face. Andre had finally stopped crying. His sobs had quieted into ragged, hitched breaths. He was watching me. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was raw. "Dad, I can clean that. Let me help." I didn't look up from my task. "You don't get to touch this," I said. My voice was flat, empty of all emotion. "You lost that right." I knelt, ignoring the sharp pain in my 69-year-old knees. I began picking up the large, sharp pieces of the broken plate, Althea's china, the one her mother had given her, the set that had survived 40 Thanksgivings. "Dad, please." Andre wept, crawling a few feet closer. "Please just say something. Yell at me, hit me, something. Please don't be like this." I stopped picking up the pieces. I sat back on my heels right there amidst the mess. I held a curved piece of blue-flowered porcelain in my hand. "She loved this plate," I said, my voice hollow. "She loved this house." I finally looked up at him, really looked at him. "You said I was selfish," I murmured, "that I was holding on to this shack, this museum. You wanted to know why." Andre just stared, his eyes red and swollen like a lost child. "You think I live here because I'm poor?" I asked. "You think I live here because I'm a simple toilet fixer? You think I couldn't afford a penthouse like the one I gave you?" He shook his head, muttering, "I don't know anything." "No, you don't." I took a deep breath. The story felt heavy on my chest. "Your mother, Althea," I began, "she grew up in this neighborhood. But not like you did. She didn't grow up in this house. She grew up serving in the house next door, the big white one on the corner." Andre's head lifted slightly, his brows furrowing in confusion. "What, Grandma and Grandpa Hayes, they weren't servants?" "Yes," I said. "They were. Her father was the groundskeeper. Her mother was the cook, for a wealthy white family, and Althea, she was the little girl who helped her mother polish the silver. She lived in the servants' quarters over the garage." "I never knew that," he whispered. "Of course you didn't. We wanted you to grow up without that burden. We wanted you to feel equal. We wanted you to feel free. We wanted you to be better than us, but we wanted you to be good." I looked at the piece of china in my hand. "But your mother, she never forgot. She used to stand on the street right out there and look at this house, this little bungalow. It was owned by a teacher, and to her, it was a palace. It wasn't a mansion. It was just a home, a place where the family lived, not the servants, a place where you could walk in the front door and be the master of your own life. When we started R&H, when the money started coming in, real money, I wanted to buy her a mansion in Buckhead. I wanted to give her everything. I wanted to buy her the house she used to serve in. And you know what she told me?" I looked at him, his face a mask of agonizing comprehension. She said, "Zay, I don't want their house. I don't want their life. I just want our life." And she pointed to this bungalow. The teacher had just passed away. It was for sale. We bought it. I continued the memory as clear as yesterday. We paid cash. It was the first thing we ever bought, and we worked with our own hands. I built these bookshelves. She stitched those curtains. We raised you in these rooms. When she got sick, when we knew the money couldn't fix it, I sat with her right here in this room. I asked her again, Althea, let me move you. Let me get you better doctors, a penthouse, a view of the city. My voice cracked, just once. I cleared my throat, and she held my hand, and she made me promise. She said, Zay, this house is our truth. It's where we came from. It's what we built. Don't let the money poison it. Don't let the world in. Don't sell it. Don't ever let them take it. Promise me you'll protect it. Promise me it will always be our home. I looked at Andre. I promised her I would, I whispered. I promised her I would protect this house from the greed of the outside world. I promised her I would protect you from it. I stood up slowly, my knees popping. I walked over to him, this stranger on my floor. I kept one of those promises. I took the gravy-stained photograph of Althea. I held it out in front of his face. I promised I would protect this house, but I failed. I failed to protect it from you. I failed to protect you from your greed, from her greed. I held the picture closer. Look at her, Andre. Look at your mother's face. He squeezed his eyes shut. No, please. Dad, I can't. Look at her. I roared, my voice finally breaking with all the pain of the last 2 years. He opened his eyes. He saw his mother's smiling face covered in congealed gravy and bright red cranberry sauce. This, I said, my voice dropping back to a cold, dead whisper. This is what you chose. This is what you allowed. You let your wife throw garbage at your mother's memory, in your mother's house. I pulled the picture back. You didn't just disown me tonight, son. You disowned her. You disowned everything we ever were. Andre made a sound, a deep guttural animal sound of a soul breaking. It was the sound of a man who finally understood exactly what he had lost. It was far more than a penthouse and a car. I turned my back on him. I couldn't look at him anymore. The penthouse is gone, I said, walking toward the kitchen to get a cloth and a dustpan. The car is gone. The money is gone. Your father is gone. I stopped at the doorway. I didn't turn around. Get out of my house. He looked up at me. His face was a mask of snot and tears and utter self-destruction. Dad, he whimpered. Please don't say that. Where will I go? What will I do? I have nothing. I have nothing. He was finally truly understanding. He was at zero. I looked down at him, not with hatred, not even with anger anymore. I just felt a vast, cold, empty pity. Yes, I said. Now you have nothing. He flinched as if I had struck him. You have no job, I stated, ticking off the list. You have no car. You have no penthouse. The wife you chose. I suspect she will be gone by morning just as soon as she finds a ride from her bankrupt, unconscious mother. You have nothing. I knelt not to help him, not to comfort him. I knelt to look him in the eye so he would hear and understand every single word. You have nothing, I repeated. Just like I had nothing 40 years ago, when I started with my own 2 hands, a wife who believed in me and a set of values. You have your 2 hands. The other things, the values, the belief, you threw those away tonight. Please, he begged, grabbing the sleeve of my old sweater. Please, Dad, I can fix it. I'll do anything. Just don't do this. I pulled my arm free from his grasp. You can start over, I said. My voice wasn't kind. It was factual. It was the voice I used in the boardroom when a failing division needed to be liquidated. You can learn. You can learn what work actually means. Not shuffling papers in an office I gave you pretending to be a big shot, but real, hard, honest work. The kind that makes you sweat. The kind that makes your back ache. The kind that makes you too tired to be arrogant. He shook his head, not wanting to hear it. But I wasn't finished. You can learn respect. I continued, standing up straight, towering over him. You can learn that you don't step on the people who built the ladder you're trying to climb. You can learn that a memory is more valuable than a balance sheet. You can learn that a wife's love is a privilege, not a weapon. And maybe, I said, walking away from him toward the wall, maybe someday you can learn how to be a son again. But my son, the son Althea and I raised, he would have never let this happen. He would have defended his mother's memory. He would have defended his father, even if he thought his father was just a simple poor man. I don't know who you are, Andre. You need to go find out. I didn't look at him. I looked at the broken plate on the floor. Dad, he whispered one last time, his voice broken. He was looking for one small sign of forgiveness, one crack in the ice. I gave him nothing. I heard him get up. He used the wall to pull himself to his feet, his body shaking with sobs. He looked around the room, this room he grew up in, as if seeing it for the first time. He saw the broken plate. He saw the gravy on the wall. He saw the faces of his parents in the photographs looking at him, judging him. He stumbled to the front door. I heard his hand rest on the knob. He paused. He was probably looking back, hoping I would turn around, hoping I would say something. I didn't. I heard the front door open. The sound of the cool November air and the distant sound of the tow truck's diesel engine mingled in the sudden silence, and then I heard the door close. A soft final click. He was gone. The house was quiet. It was over. The performance was done. The mask was off. The parasites were gone. I stood alone in my dining room. The silence was deafening. It was heavier than their screaming. It was the sound of a vacuum, the sound of an amputation. I looked at the mess, the half-eaten expensive turkey on the table, the spilled wine, the shattered china, the desecration on the wall. The adrenaline that had been coursing through me, that cold, clear, righteous anger, began to drain away. It left me weak. It left me empty. And in its place, something else flooded in. Grief. Not for them, not for Richard or Karen or Tiffany. I felt nothing for them but a distant, cold contempt. The grief was for him, for Andre. I hadn't just executed a financial plan. I had just disowned my child, my son, Althea's boy. My knees, my 69-year-old knees, felt weak. I grabbed the back of the dining chair, the one Richard had been sitting in, and I sat down heavily. I put my head in my hands. I've lost a son. The thought echoed in the quiet room. I had protected my legacy. I had defended my wife's memory. I had regained my dignity. But I had lost my son. Was it worth it? I looked up at the wall, at the picture, at her smile now obscured by the filth his wife had thrown. Yes. Yes, it was. Because the son I loved, the son Althea raised, was already gone. He died years ago, maybe the moment he met Tiffany, maybe even before. He was replaced by that weak, grasping, cowardly stranger. What I did tonight, I didn't kill him. I just acknowledged his death. I had to protect what was left, the memory, the legacy, the house. This wasn't just a building, it was Althea. It was her truth. It was our truth. Andre had chosen a different truth, a cheaper one. One built on lies and Rolexes and the approval of bankrupt fools. He had chosen to be their son, not mine. The finality of it settled on me. This was the true, terrible cost of my wealth. Not the money itself, but the secret of it. By hiding it to protect him from its influence, I had made him weak. I had made him susceptible to the very things I was afraid of. I had never tested his character, and tonight, when it was finally brutally tested, he failed. Spectacularly. I sat there for a long time, an hour, maybe two. The house grew cold. The smell of the congealing food, the smell of my wife's desecrated memory was nauseating. Slowly, mechanically, I stood up. I went to the kitchen. I got a bucket. I filled it with hot, soapy water. I got a sponge and a trash bag and a dustpan. I came back. I got down on my hands and knees, ignoring the sharp protest from my joints. I started picking up the pieces of Althea's china. Each piece was a memory. This one with the small blue flower. This one was from Andre's 10th birthday. This one the edge of the platter. This one was from our last Thanksgiving with her before she got sick. I put them in the trash bag. They were just broken things. Then I stood up. I took the sponge. I dipped it in the hot soapy water. I walked to the wall. I reached up, and with a tenderness that felt like a prayer, I began to wipe the gravy from my wife's face. I cleaned the glass. I cleaned the frame. I cleaned the plaster. I was meticulous. It took a long time. When I was finished, the picture was clean again. Her smile was back, bright, hopeful, the way I remembered her. I looked at her. "I'm sorry, Althea," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm sorry I let them in. I'm sorry it came to this. I tried to save him. I really did. But he didn't want to be saved." I took the picture from the wall. I held it close to my chest. I sat down in my old comfortable armchair, the one Tiffany hated. The house was silent. I had lost a son. There was a gaping, raw hole in my heart where he used to be. But the house was clean. My dignity was intact. And Althea's legacy, her legacy was safe. I had won. And it felt exactly like loss. 6 months, half a year. It is amazing how much can change and how much can stay exactly the same. The house in Adair Park is just as quiet as it was that night, but it is a different kind of quiet now. It is not the silence of loneliness. It is the silence of peace. I still have my coffee on the porch. I still look at Althea's picture on the wall. The gravy stain is gone. I had the wall professionally replastered and painted. The house is cleaner. I do not just fix toilets anymore. I mean, I never did. But now the world knows it. I went back to the office. The real one. The one on the 50th floor of the R&H Tower downtown with the glass walls that overlook the entire city. It felt strange at first. After 10 years of hiding in plain sight of pretending to be small, it felt almost too loud. But it was necessary. R&H Capital needed its chairman back. The myth, as Richard had called me, had to become a man again. Terry was glad. "It's good to have you back, Zay," he said, handing me the thick quarterly reports last week. "The boardroom was getting boring without you. These Ivy League kids have no style." We were in that quarterly meeting when he slid a different file across the polished mahogany table. It was not a financial report. It was a private investigator's update. We still keep tabs on them. Not out of concern, out of necessity. You do not let a snake go without knowing which hole it slithered into. "Richard's Interiors," Terry said, tapping the folder. "Officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy last Tuesday. Total liquidation." I just nodded, sipping my water. "He couldn't find another investor." Terry almost smiled. "He tried. He went to every bank in Atlanta. But when a man is publicly called on a $5 million loan by R&H Capital, well, nobody wants to be next. The word untrustworthy doesn't even begin to cover his reputation. He's toxic. He lost everything. The foreclosed house, the repossessed cars, even the fake Rolex. He probably had to sell it for parts." "And Karen?" I asked. Terry slid a photograph across the table. It was a grainy snapshot taken from a distance. It was Karen. She was standing behind a cash register wearing a cheap, bright blue vest with a yellow logo. A plastic name tag was pinned to it. "She's a cashier," Terry said. "At a discount supermarket out in Marietta. Morning shift. Makes $12 an hour. Richard is apparently working as a night watchman at a self-storage facility." I looked at the photo of the woman who had collapsed on my floor, the woman who had laughed at my wife's memory, the woman who had called my home a dump while wearing a $2,000 shawl. Now she was wearing a polyester vest and asking people if they wanted paper or plastic. "Minimum wage," I repeated. "That's honest work." "Poetic," Terry agreed. I pushed the photo back toward him. "I'm done with them. What about the other one?" Terry's expression, which had been amused, hardened. "Tiffany." "She didn't wait long, did she?" I asked. "She didn't wait a week," Terry confirmed. "The moment she realized Andre was truly cut off, that he wasn't just fired, but erased, she filed for divorce. The very next Monday. Cited irreconcilable differences and financial fraud." I had to laugh at that. A short, bitter, dry sound. "She accused him of fraud." "Oh yes," Terry said. "She claimed he lied to her about his family's wealth, that she was a victim of his deception. She tried to sue him for alimony, claiming she was accustomed to a certain lifestyle. And the judge, who had apparently read the news articles about the Thanksgiving incident, laughed her out of court. She got nothing, not a single cent. She's back living with her parents, or rather in the small government-subsidized 2-bedroom apartment her parents managed to get after they lost the house. So the three of them are together again, the unholy trinity, back where they started, in a small box full of resentment." "Exactly," Terry said. He closed the file. "That closes the books on them. Now, About the Atlanta port expansion. He moved on. That is what we do. We are businessmen. The problem was solved. The asset was liquidated. But I could not move on just yet. There was one piece left. One name not in the file. And, Andre, I asked. I tried to make my voice sound casual, like an afterthought. Terry paused his hand on the new reports. He looked at me, his gaze softening, losing its corporate edge. He's not in the file, Zay. I know, I said. I'm not asking as the chairman, I'm asking as a man. Terry sighed. He leaned back in his chair. He's around. He lost the penthouse, obviously. He lost everything. He spent a few weeks on a friend's couch, from what we can tell, but the friend got tired of him. He doesn't have Tiffany's ruthlessness. He's just weak. Where is he, Terry? He's working, Terry said. My PI found him last week. He's working a construction job, non-union, cash labor, hauling drywall at a site in Decatur. I pictured Andre, my son, the man who wore tailored suits and drove a BMW, hauling drywall. He's staying at a weekly rate motel off the interstate, Terry added gently. He's alone, Zay. He's hit bottom. The real bottom. Not the one his in-laws are in. He's truly on his own. I just nodded. I stared out the glass window at the city I owned, at the life I had built. Thank you, Terry, I said. That's all. Let's talk about the port expansion. I didn't let him see the pain. The meeting continued for another hour. I made decisions. I signed papers. I allocated budgets. I was the chairman. But the whole time, all I could see was my son in a cheap motel room, his hands probably raw from a day of real work. I had won. I had protected Althea's legacy. I had taken out the trash. So why did it still feel like I had one more piece of business to attend to? I still keep the house in Adair Park. I could never sell it. It's not a museum anymore. It's just home. I've been staying here more than the penthouse downtown. The penthouse is Terry's office now, mostly. He likes the view. I prefer my porch. I was here on a Tuesday night, 6 months to the day after that Thanksgiving. I was sitting in Althea's armchair reading a book. I had just made a simple dinner. Red beans and rice, the way Althea taught me. The smell filled the quiet house. Then a knock. It wasn't a loud knock. It wasn't the arrogant rap of Richard or the frantic pounding of Tiffany. It was soft, hesitant, almost like someone was hoping I wouldn't hear. I put my book down. I walked to the front door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. I looked through the peephole. And my heart, which I thought had turned to cold stone where my son was concerned, gave a painful single lurch. It was Andre. I opened the door. The man standing on my porch was not the man who had left it. The sharp, expensive suit was gone. The polished shoes were gone. The arrogant posture was gone. The man in front of me was thin, thinner than I'd ever seen him. His face was gaunt with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard days. He was wearing dusty work boots, jeans stained with what looked like plaster, and a thin jacket that was not enough for the cool night air. His hands were stuffed into his pockets. He looked broken. He looked 48, not 38. We just stood there for a long time, a full minute. He didn't speak. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a shame so profound I could barely look at it. He couldn't meet my gaze. He was looking at my chin, my shoulder, the floor. I didn't speak either. I just waited. He was the one who left. He had to be the one to speak. Finally, he took a shaky breath. His eyes were red. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was raw, unfamiliar. He cleared his throat. "I know I have no right to be here. I know that." He looked down at his boots, scuffing the welcome mat Althea had stitched. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm not here for money. I'm not here for a job. I know all that is. It's gone. I know that." He was rambling, the words spilling out of him, desperate. I've been walking here every night for a week. Just standing on the sidewalk, looking at the house. I didn't have the guts to knock." I still said nothing. I just watched him. He finally looked up. He finally met my eyes. And I saw it. The complete and total absence of arrogance. The void where the pride used to be. "I'm not here for me," he said, his voice cracking. I'm here for her. He gestured vaguely toward the wall inside, toward the wall where her picture hung. I can't sleep, he whispered, and now the tears were rolling down his face, silent and hot. I see it every night. The plate, the gravy on her face. I hear what Tiffany said, and I hear what I said. I hear myself, and He couldn't finish. He choked on a sob, covering his face with his hands. They weren't the soft hands of a director. They were rough, calloused, red at the knuckles. They were the hands of a man who hauls drywall. I'm so sorry, Dad, he finally managed to say, his voice muffled by his hands. I'm not here to ask you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. I'm here to apologize for the plate, for Mom's picture. I failed. I failed. I failed you. I failed her. Chim. He stood there, a grown man, weeping on my doorstep. And I looked at him. The image of the weeping, weak coward on the dining room floor finally faded. The arrogant, preening man in the designer suit faded. And for 1 second, just 1 second, I saw a glimpse of the boy I raised. The 9-year-old boy who cried just like that when he accidentally broke Althea's favorite vase. The boy who was so terrified he had disappointed her. That boy was still in there, buried. But there, it wasn't forgiveness, it was recognition. I took a deep breath. The anger was gone, the coldness was... It was still there. But it wasn't a wall of ice anymore. It was just a cold, clear day. I stepped back from the door. I opened it wider. He looked up confused, his face a mess of tears. Come in, Andre, I said. My voice was quiet. He flinched as if he was expecting me to slam the door in his face. What? I made dinner, I said, gesturing with my head toward the kitchen. Red beans and rice. There's enough for 2. He stared at me, his mind unable to process the simple invitation. He wasn't expecting an execution, but he wasn't expecting this either. I turned my back on him and started walking toward the kitchen. It's getting cold. Are you coming in, or are you going to stand on the porch all night? I heard him take a hesitant, sharp breath. I heard his work boots step slowly onto the hardwood floor of his childhood home. I heard the front door click shut behind him. I didn't turn around. I just went to the cabinet and took down a second plate. We have a lot to talk about, I said, my back to him as I scooped a pile of rice onto the plate. The lesson was over, but the education was just beginning. Looking back, the lesson wasn't just about the money. It was about respect. I lived simply, and my family mistook my humility for weakness. They mistook my silence for stupidity. They only valued what they could see, not the foundation it was built on. True wealth isn't in a bank account. It's in your character, your word, and the legacy you protect. I gave my son every opportunity to build his character, but he chose to trade it all for the approval of bankrupt fools. They didn't just disrespect me. They disrespected my entire life, and that is a debt no amount of money can ever repay. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Let me know your story in the comments below.